The paintbrush was a gentle kiss upon the vellum, a swan dive of crimson paint against immaculate bone-white paper. The calligraphy Eidenel breathed into life almost brought him to tears by its simple beauty, the soft strokes resonant with a gentle innocence.
Are you finished, Aha?
Aemonli asked. Eidenel turned to his son. He restrained a happy sob. It happened whenever he looked into Aemonli's face. Such was the onslaught of frenzied love that the boy's eyes produced in his ancient heart. The Aeldari child was less than a decade old, barely more than an infant, but already he had his mother's grace and his father's heart. Eidenel gasped. Sometimes the emotion was too much. Aemonli was like a burning supernova at the center of Eidenel's soul, his purpose, and his entire life.
Yes, love of my heart. Do you like it?
Aemonli smiled.
Will you read it to me?
Eidenel shared the smile. He glanced around the rest of the emergency creche. Children of Eondin playing games of high strategy under the loving eyes of their nurturers. The heartbreaking beauty of their souls entwined in that small space of spellsong bone, breathing hope along wraithbone arches. And yet, lurking within that laughter and innocence, Eidenel could feel their fear, a spreading poison echoing with anguish and pain. It mixed with the somber tranquility of the Infinity Circuit, a terrible juxtaposition of life and death that struck Eidenel cold.
Uh-huh. Of course I will read it to you.
Eidenel brought his eyes back to his son. He did not need to look at the calligraphy, for the words had been sketched upon his essence from the moment the Devourers had arrived.
On a journey, ill, my dream goes wandering over withered fields. It is very sad, Aha. It is, love of my heart.
Eidenel glanced at his calligraphy. The paint dried slowly, surface tension maintaining its graceful form. Eidenel knew it would never fully dry. In the coming hours, the page would be ripped apart by monsters, a fleeting breath upon creation before an eternal silence. He had crafted the poem knowing that this would be so, infusing each brushstroke with the tragedy of the transience of mortal life.
Are you scared? Yes, my child.
Eidenel drew Aemonli close, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his own. Another stab of pure feeling electrocuted his soul, threatening to split his spirit stone asunder. Eidenel closed his eyes.
Would it be so terrible?
He asked his son.
To be lost forever upon this path of love?
Aemonli looked up at him with wide, serious eyes. A moment passed, 1,000 micro-expressions of complexity and loss. Eidenel reached down to wipe the building tears from his son's eyes.
I miss her too, love of my heart. Is she going to die?
Eidenel sighed, a gentle, rhythmic gesture that ushered calm into his son's soul.
Death is the fate of all things, my child. I wish she was here. As do I, Aemonli. But your mother is lost upon her path. She belongs to Cain.
Eva knelt at the shrine of the bloody-handed god, naked and alone.
Blood runs.
She reached into the cauldron of simmering blood. Ritual fires kept the liquid hot. That and the rage of a shattered god.
Anger rises.
Using 2 slender fingers, Ava painted crimson runes across her face. Distantly, she heard the war god howl in homicidal fury, trembling through the aspect shrine and the exarch's soul. She felt her passion stir, the call of battle, an insistent pulse through her beating heart.
Death wakes.
She continued to paint the runes of battle across her body, feeling the blood cool and harden into frigid scabs across her flesh. Hers was a lithe body of muscle and sinew, a spring-wrenched whip of shrieking slaughter. Ava breathed. She tried to steady her thoughts, lest the bloodlust overtake her completely.
War calls.
She heard another roar from the depths of the craft world, answering her bloody invocation. Ava smiled, drawing her lips tightly back against her gums. She could not see her reflection, but she knew she looked ghastly, a wraith of murder in a temple of bone, daubed with the blood of the killed.
It is time,
She whispered. The exarch rose, seeming to simply unfold from the floor. She padded over to her items of war and stretched a tight-fit body glove over her body. Her lips still shifted to silent prayers. The shrine was an elegant temple of slender wraithbone, sung by militant seers into jagged, vicious shapes to resemble a bracket of murderous thorns. A Drakari might have found patterns resonant of the Dark City, but this would miss the calm perfection within the slicing chaos. The myriad paths through which a sister of the shrine might travel without harm. In this, the temple represented an aspect of the bloody-handed god himself, the power to disorientate through fear and to dance along damnation's edge. Ava reached for her armor, a bone-white, lightweight bodysuit, reinforced with psychosensitive bioplastics that shifted with her every movement. The weight of her spirit stone in the center of her breastplate was intoxicating. Ava heard the warlike whispers of those that had worn the armor before, those sisters with whom she was now one. Ava had not always been her name.
I bring only death,
The exarch murmured, invoking her phoenix lord.
and leave only corpses.
She donned her helm, the war mask that, in truth, never came off. She felt from the psychosonic amplifiers whispers beyond her lips. Her shock of red hair flowed from the top like a lion's mane.
We are the Banshee.
She said, reaching for her executioner power glaive. She slotted her shuriken pistol in its holster.
As we tormented you, Kayla Mencha Kane, we now torment our foe.
The exarch strode to the entrance of the aspect shrine, the wraithbone doors folding outwards to the plazas of Ienden. There, her aspect warriors waited, her sisters ready to don the mask once more. They were backdropped by a burning sky, split apart by spiral tornadoes of living, writhing flesh.
It is time.
Ava said.
We howl the Banshee's scream.
Her sisters replied with a ululation of battle, a trilling howl that stirred Ava to the brink of madness. Beneath her mask, the exarch grinned the grotesque smile of the already dead. Maeva stared up at the gate, silently willing the runes to stir. Her haste was unseemly, but Maeva didn't care. Such was the privilege of the outcast. She had found the portal in the dark caves of an ominous desert planet, inexorably drawn to its slow, mournful song. She had found sentience there, the Monkai that lived in the brutish cities of black pollution and industrial clamor knew nothing of this treasure. But other, even more primitive humans had discovered it generations ago. Recognizing the place as sacred, they had transformed the caves into a temple of glinting metals, primeval murals, and gleaming bone. Upon seeing Maeva, they had wept. They had fallen to their knees in adulation, inching closer to kiss her feet. Of course, Maeva had not let any of those lips stain her boots, and yet their submission had stayed her wrath. They did not understand, but at least they had showed respect. At least they were trying. Now, they watched from the shadows and murmured tuneful prayers in hushed tones. The noise was ugly and distracting, but Maeva left them to it. They had honored the Webway Gate for generations. She would let them give witness. She inwardly berated herself. Her thoughts had drifted, a common peril of her wandering path. Maeva knew how easy it would be to lose herself in a comforting diversion. For in truth, she was afraid. The runes of the gate shimmered. The ranger's invocation had stirred them from slumber, but the portal was still drowsy, its magics having long fallen into disuse. Maeva was tempted to repeat the psychic rites. She resisted the lure. She placed a hand against the spirit stone on her chest, willing her soul to some measure of peace. She exhaled. Since speaking with Irilith all those months ago, a terrible feeling of dread had not left her heart. Instead, it had intensified. Forbidden parts of Maeva's psyche stirred apocalyptic prophecies, haunting her nightmares and sent shivers down her spine. What had begun as fear had risen to a fever pitch of awful urgency. Maeva had to return home. She had to return to Iandin. She felt the portal shudder in empathy with her soul. Swirling motes of light formed at the edges of empty space. The Monkai savages gasped in holy ecstasy. Maeva thought of her twin sister, she who had once been Karale, and now was Ava, exarch of the howling banshees. A tear fell down the ranger's face in preemptive grief.
I was the oldest,
she murmured in self-recrimination. In her long years of isolation, she had become well accustomed to conversations with herself.
By mere hours, but I was the oldest. I should have steered you on the bloody-handed path.
Her lip curled.
Our bloodline has ever struggled with the Iolethra. Our generation, sister, is no different. An exarch and an outcast.
Mention of generations whispered truths across her soul. The ranger's eyes narrowed. She had long suspected the existence of a nephew, but Maeva could not be sure without excessive risk. The outcast smiled sadly. She wondered what Idenel had named his son. She wondered if she would ever get the chance to meet him. The motes of light spread like crystalline webs across the portal's expanse. Where those lines of light met, they blossomed into flowering petals. forming a translucent, shimmering sea of psychic illumination. Maeva sighed in relief. She checked her rifle and prepared herself for a marathon sprint.
Do not follow,
She warned the Monkai. She used the brutish tongue of their interstellar tyranny. They stared back at her, overcome. Maeva could only hope that they understood.
Do not follow.
She repeated.
You would not survive the pass beyond.
She nodded to them, restraining a smile. They were brutish, foul-smelling things, and yet there was something charming in their childlike wonder. Something sweet about the dull, animal comprehension in their bulbous eyes. The ranger gestured a protective warding. She remembered one of Idenel's poems and recited it aloud in the language of the Aeldari.
After killing a spider, how lonely I feel.
Maeva sighed.
Do not follow,
She repeated, and ran through the gate. He dreamed as if in a dull fever, mind drifting in the tepid swamps of eternity's past. There were others dreaming with him. They sank in the gloom, their voices mere whispers, breathing half-formed names that trailed to nothing. Those names echoed in the mire. He murmured names of his own.
Imoriel. Idenel.
As the names took shape across his wisping lips, he tried to conjure faces that might match his recollections, but he did not remember.
Imoriel. Idenel.
The names were as precious as gems, hoarded jealously to his heavy chest. He murmured them again and again, sinking deeper into the fog, repeating the phonemes so that he would never forget.
Imoriel. Idenel.
Flashes of recollection scenes shimmered in the murk, will-o'-the-wisp temptations that snatched for his concentration. Sensations of sight and sound, compressions of gravity as he flew fast through the black void oceans of space. Kurnus, calling back to the hunt, leaves entwined in his unkept hair.
Imoriel. Idenel.
He pushed those scenes away. He drew the names closer to his breast. They danced around him, shimmering stars in a swirling infinity of twilight night. He heard singing. It reached out to him and the others, each to each. It was a mournful sound. Its lyrics spoke of grief and shame. He tried not to listen, but the song would not be ignored. It was a siren call, keening through his essence and stirring him from the dark. He sought the two names, but found he had forgotten them. He sighed the sorrows of ancient things and listened to the stirring song. They came not as individuals, but as a single mass. A wave of slithering, scratching, scuttling, scurrying, sliming things, red of tooth and claw. Ava watched them from the air, striking an imperious pose from the open ramp of her falcon. Her sister stood beside her. The Exarch could feel their hearts stirring to hot-blooded fury, the call of Kayla Minsha Kane aching through their souls. The battle was already met. Aspect warriors of the swooping Hawk Shrine dove among swarming shoals of writhing gargoyles, las blasters carving great scythes through schools of alien beasts. Ava's falcon flew in the thermals of that slaughter. It nimbly dodged the broken bodies of winged monsters, its brilliant yellow hull unstained by alien vitae. On the streets below, disciples of the dire Avenger Shrine fought a moving battle against endless hordes of teeming creatures. Each monster little more than a pair of scythes and bounding legs. Shuriken shards cut them down in droves, but still the devourers kept coming. Mindless, hideous beasts under the sole thrall of a starving god. Even above the sound of war, the bombastic scuttling of the swarm, the whirlwind sheen of slicing shuriken, the humming roar of gravity-defying engines. Ava could hear that alien, idiot god screaming. It was a cacophony of overlapping, unnatural voices, reaching such heights of pitch and sound that it almost cracked her spirit stone in two. It reminded her of the shriek of the banshees. If Ava let it, that infernal noise would lance through her soul and shatter it into jagged pieces. Ava focused on the sounds of battle, forcing the hive mind's scream back to the recesses of her mind. The tumult of war soothed her. She tasted blood on her lips and licked them clean.
There,
She announced. She pointed with her executioner power glaive at the domed roof of a tall, slender tower. There, a winged monstrosity perched on the cracked marble, resembling a giant, grotesque bat. The tower wavered in the backdraft gales of war. Its sleek, curving shape met broken arches, built into disintegrating foundations. Once, it had been the Tower of Songs. Now, it was just another ruin in the midst of an apocalypse. One of Ava's sisters ducked back into the Falcon, delivering her instructions to the pilot. The grav vehicle, shining sunburst yellow, turned swiftly and sped closer. Ava slowly lowered to her haunches, a wildcat preparing to pounce. The monster saw them coming. It roared its challenge to a poisoned sky. Slender, multi-jointed limbs stretched out wide, dragging out membranous wings the color of blood-stained bone. Other, shorter limbs ended with vicious, scything talons. The deep red of its carapace was a ghastly contrast to the bone white of its flesh. Its resemblance to the colors of the howling banshee was undeniable, an unwelcome parody. Ava could feel its psychic pulse wash over the battlefield, a sparking neuron of that immense, starving mind. The Falcon flew overhead. The howling banshees leapt from the open ramp and into the crucible of war. They ululated as they fell, psychosonic amplifiers forming one ear-splitting noise. Marble cracked. The Tyranid Prime staggered. Pitches designed to shut down neural functions made a havoc of its alien biochemistry and briefly stuttered its connection to the hive mind. The swarms below howled in bestial agony. But then the psychic force of the hive mind reasserted its power. It closed down on reality like a metal clamp. Ava felt a terrible cold silence across her psyche, an invisible shockwave of psychic might that caused blood to pour from her ears and nose. She felt Kayla Wind die as those energies overwhelmed her, her spirit stone breaking apart and her essence shrieking in awful, abject terror. The corpse her sister left behind crumpled, plummeting at an awkward angle. Ava ululated again, trilling the call of the soul-hungry banshee of ancient lore. The horror passed. The Exarch was lost once more upon the path of war. The howling banshees hit the marble dome. But for Kalowin's corpse, which grotesquely bounced off the side and into the hordes beneath, the Aspect Warriors landed with a series of effortless combat rolls, encircling their target even as they redirected momentum's force. The monster hissed, swiping with its talons. It sheared through Ephial's mane of hair, but nothing else. Ava came up with her weapon, sweeping the executioner in a curved upward swing. The power glaive cut into the Tyrannid's torso, separating exoskeleton. From the wound came a torrent of purple fluids. Her sisters followed suit with their swords, slicing tendons and joints. The Tyrannid Prime staggered. It roared in instinctive pain, a wounded beast. And yet, its eyes glinted with an alien intelligence. With adrenalized speed, it wrenched its wings against its body, then threw them out once more. The howling banshees jumped back. Bayvina was a fraction too slow. She took the full force of the monster's left wing. The Aspect Warrior contorted upright as she flew, her control of her body absolute. She had nothing to land against but open air. She plunged downwards, screaming as she fell. The Tyrannid Prime pressed its advantage. It advanced on Sword Chorian with its talons, sparks flying as hardened chitin met flashing sword. The Aspect Warrior was forced back, weapon moving at a dizzying speed. Ava and Ephial rushed forwards. They sliced through wing membrane and sinew, but the monster kept up its attack. It ignored the pain and steaming vitae. Eventually, Sorcharian had no more ground to give. She ululated in bloody defiance, blocking one more sweep. The next bifurcated her horizontally along the chest. The Tyrannid Prime span, only now seeming to notice its many wounds. It stumbled, and Ava attacked, screaming a prayer to the bloody-handed god in a wordless screech. She sidestepped in and around the clumsy swipe and cut downwards, severing a limb at the weakened joint as Ephial tore apart the rest of its left wing. The beast bellowed, lunging forwards to bite at the Exarch's head, but Ava allowed her momentum to carry her forwards, sliding beneath its legs and regaining her footing on the other side. She sliced the executioner down its back. The blade did not pierce the scarlet chitin. The strike vented her murderous contempt in a shower of smoking sparks. The monster turned to catch her, hissing. It stumbled as a bright lance beam pierced its shoulder as the falcon came back around and flew overhead. Ava leapt into the air. Her blood was aflame to the addictive joy of battle. The Tyrannid Prime stared up at her with hateful eyes. Her mane of red hair swept back. Executioner flashed down. Across the horizon, Ava saw an eternity of slaughter and war. The Tyrannid Prime tottered. Its decapitated head slammed into the marble, sliding down the slope of the dome before disappearing off the edge. Ephial swaggered forwards, poking the headless beast with her sword. The creature toppled, smashed through the marble roof, and fell the entire height of the coral nave, crashing into the cloisters below. Ava laughed. She threw back her head and ululated in savage joy. Her sister matched the banshee's calm. Aidanel shuddered, feeling a great and terrible trespass reverberate through the infinity circuit. His face blanched at the violation. Amonlee shivered. Aidanel drew his boy into a hug and whispered to him a poem.
There is no death. There is no life. Indeed, the skies are cloudless and the river waters clear. What is happening ahead?
Aedenel felt tears on his face. He took in a long, shuddering breath.
The dead are being called to war, love of my heart.
He glanced across the crash. It broke his heart to see so many frightened faces. Their nurturers tried to soothe them, but each Aeldari struggled with their own choking grief. The brutality of the scene stirred anger in Aedenel's heart. Cain called him to bloody violence against a cruel, feckless galaxy. But then Aemonli shivered again, and all Aedenel could think about was the well-being of his son.
Do not be afraid.
He told the child.
The dead return to defend our home.
He restrained a gasp as he felt the Infinity Circuit scream.
No. I'm scared. They are waking them all.
Aedenel replied, fighting to keep the horror from his voice.
They are waking them all.
He looked down at Aemonli, forcing a brave smile.
Do not be afraid. All shall be well. Why are you crying?
Aedenel wiped at his eyes. His smile turned sad.
It is an awful thing to tear the dead from their peace. It is painful and unkind. And why are they doing it? Because they must. Because we must keep you and the other children safe.
His eyes flitted to the Wraithbone door a few moments before it unfurled open. He swallowed. Through those doors walked the ancient dead. A spirit seer led them. Their voice was a soft dirge that echoed through underworld realms. In their wake came the Wraithguard, hulking constructs of unlovely design. To any lesser species, the Wraithguard might have been beautiful. The sunburst yellow of their bodies paired well with the royal blue of their helms. The soft curves of their forms had pleasing grace. They walked softly despite their towering size. And yet, the Aeldari saw the Wraithguard for what they were. They could feel the pervasive ennui of their imprisoned souls, the sludging despair that had oozed from the stones, the confused, senile movements of the disoriented dead, and, in their hands, weapons so diabolical that they could only be wielded by the undead, tools that might split reality asunder and invite underworld horrors that no one living could bear. The younger children began to cry. The chamber filled with terrifying wails and the desperate shushing of their guardians, punctuated by the soft footfalls of the golem dead. Aedenel hugged Aemonli close. He stared at the deathly procession, repulsed by the necromancer who led them. For his son, he contained his emotions best he could. But his will had its limits, and the worst was yet to come. Wraithguard marched toward the desperate war. Their souls were diffuse, flitting against the prison of the spirit stones built into their armored breasts. Their personalities were obscured, their essences stretched and obscenely thin. But Aedenel still recognized his own kin. Abon Aethrin, his father back from the dead. His soul was confused and distressed. It whispered half-formed words, like fingers never finding purchase on a dune of sand. He stumbled, led like a child by the Spirit Seer's song, half dead and half dreaming. Idenel sobbed. Aemonli cried at his distress. But Idenel could not contain his despair. All he could do was rip his eyes away from the ghost of his father and hold his own child close. Emuriel would be among them too, his mother. Perhaps she marched through other passageways. Perhaps she looked for her husband and son. Or perhaps she did not remember, like Aban Ath Erin did not remember. The golem staggering past without a flicker of recognition, dragged by a ghoulish song into the horror of battle against the screaming hunger of the tyrannid swarms. Idenel whispered a poem.
Everything I touch with tenderness, alas, pricks like a bramble.
Maeva ran through the unreal passages of the webway, following the call of home. The ranger was no master of the hidden ways, but she was not alone. In her desperate sprint, she had met other outcasts of Eondin, the maze of the Old Ones, driving them together with fateful insistence. She knew them all. Moraid, Sinantith, Teobal, Uthne. Their exile paths had overlapped time and again. She knew it was no coincidence that she met them again now. They ran with her, quiet as they focused on their breathing. Between them, they might have been able to navigate their way back to Eondin. It would have taken time, but they might have shared their knowledge to reach their distant home. As it was, there was no need, for another was with them, one who knew such paths and was content to guide them. The Harlequin, Aurelitan of the Laughing God, their costume dappled with forest greens and autumn yellows, a clash of colors in irregular patterns that mocked all sensibilities. Maeva recognized the colors of the mask of the Veiled Path, but she did not know the player's name, and the Harlequin had not provided one. She had simply appeared, her mask a laughing grin, and pointed the way with a slender sword. Maeva hoped it was not a trick. The devotees of Kegorak enjoyed their practical jokes, after all. But the ranger believed. She had faith that they were being honestly led. Perhaps the doom of Eondin was ironic enough. Perhaps the black comedy of its dark fate was enough. Maeva returned her attention to her breathing. Anabolic acids collected within her body. Her feet barely touched the ground as they ran through silvery blue corridors of unfathomable dimensions. The Harlequin was above them, dancing along the ceiling. For there was no up, no down, other than what was relative to where one stood. Such was the magic of the Old Ones who had spun these webs, imposing fey rules upon a realm that was otherwise without reason or rhyme. The Harlequin darted left, and the exiles followed. They turned a corner that Maeva hadn't seen, seeming to shift through a reflective pool of shimmering water. Beyond, either 10 meters away or 10,000, was a shining gate. Maeva smiled sadly. The gate felt like home.
Together,
Teobal said, over panted breaths. His soul overflowed with yearning pain, resolute and resigned. The others nodded.
She is screaming,
Uthne said. Maeva agreed. She could feel the infinity circuit howling, a mother clutching the corpse of their stillborn child. The exile in her wanted to run. It wanted to turn away from that screaming and flee, so that Maeva would never have to hear such an awful sound again. But Maeva knew she could not abandon her home. The Aeldari within her wanted to see her family one last time, before the doom of all and the gnashing of teeth of she who thirsts. The Harlequin was first to the gate. She somersaulted through the gleaming light, passing through one dimension and into another. Maeva was second. He staggered down long-forgotten paths, reminiscences tingling along the fading contours of his wraith-like soul. He walked in places so distant in memory that he had forgotten they were real. Arched catacombs of slender bone that opened into elegant streets bathed in silver light. Was it real? Or was it just a dream? A whispered echo of slumbers past. The song led him on, a lullaby of war and home. He paused, cognition stuttering as two visions overlaid one another. The memory dream and the nightmare present. The Eondin that was, and the burning acid pits it had become. Purple-leafed trees spread their arching beauty across dappled streets in one moment, and dissolved into putrid sludge the next, dragged down by insects that vomited acid through ichor string teeth. Graceful archways stood proud, their bone etched with ancient poems of heroes past, and then collapsed upon themselves. Discarded pillars overridden with scuttling evil things. A sky of silver light blackened to tornado swarms. Infinite horizons choked into orange flames. He felt anger. He brought up his cannon and fired. A beam of unlight belched across tainted air. It struck a hunched behemoth of scarlet chitin, blossoming on impact into a rift of watercolor purples. Impossible lightning lashed the monster from beyond, even as unnatural storms sucked with such force that chitin cracked, and its fragments slipped to that place between places. The Carnifex bellowed in anger and pain. Others fired upon it. Portions of its armored body disintegrated into the howling warp. It rushed forwards. It was a cannonball of chitin, tottering on cracked red hooves, lashing out with four limbs of talon and claw. He did not fear. He did not feel the monster's stinking breath on him, nor the reverberating shudders its movement made through the broken ground. He was still not sure if any of it was real. He fired again, ripples of the Imperium widening across the behemoth's chest. The warp swallowed a bloody patch of ripped-away exoskeleton. Gore filled the hole left behind, but the monster was still driven forwards by the force of its charge. The Carnifex smashed into him. He rose into the air, feeling as if he was sinking into deep waters. There was no pain. Once more, he heard that distant, keening song. It dragged him onto his feet, his body puppeted upon strange, ethereal strings. He stepped from the rubble of a broken wall. He reached for his cannon, taking a faltering step. One of his legs was snapped and dragged behind him, but it was intact enough to steady his balance. The song rose higher, bright with glory and wrath. He brought up his cannon. The killing resumed. The Farseer's telepathic message felt strange.
Fall back to the catacombs. We shall make our stand within.
Ava scowled. The Exarch did not want to fall back. To fall back was to retreat from the exhilaration of battle, to return to the half-life that lingered in uneasy peace.
Exarch!
Aeofel said, sensing Ava's battle lust. Her voice was distant. Ava barely heard her.
Blood runs. Anger rises. Sister! Death wakes. War. Ava!
The Exarch snapped back to reality, blinking beneath her war mask. Executioner Glaive was covered in alien ichor, the bone white of her armor stained purple and black. She stood in a crater made from Tyranid corpses, her shoulders heaving. Ephial fought beside her, cutting down a Hormagaunt before it could finish its killing pounds.
Sister.
Eva whispered. She spun in a half circle, tenderly decapitating 3 hissing creatures.
We must leave, Exarch. The falcon flies close.
Ava reached out with her glaive, piercing another Hormagaunt through its wretched heart. She felt its blood splatter across her chest, warm even through her armor.
I cannot, sister. You must!
Their falcon crested the crater of bodies, shuriken cannons spinning discs of razored death. Ephial ran towards it, pausing only to offer Ava a plaintive hand.
War calls, Exarch! Iron calls!
Ava took her hand, allowing her sister to guide her to the falcon's ramp.
So be it.
The grav tank rose, shuriken cannons still spitting as Hormagaunt broods threw their bodies against its hull. Ava heard scratching the underside of the vehicle. She braced before the falcon spun, flinging off its unwanted stowaways with gravitational force. The ramp was still open, and Ava took in the scene. The plazas were choked with the bodies of the dead, the broken, bloodied limbs of Tyranids, and the shattered corpses of Aeldari warriors. Wraithguard, more Wraithguard than Ava had ever seen in one place, fought a fighting retreat alongside Guardian militia, retreating into the shadowed depths of the Eondin craft world.
They have awoken them all,
Ephial said. Her voice was both amazed and horrified.
not just the willing. Them all.
Ava went to reply, but found she had no words. Her tongue felt swollen in her mouth. Her pulse raced hot. Unable to speak, she simply observed. Her entire essence ached to be back within the fight. The Exarch felt half real, the vivid colors of battle fading to ghostly gray. Her hand went to a small pouch on her belt. There, she felt the weeping soul of Sor Charian, forever trapped within a crystal smaller than her palm. Maeva checked her shuriken pistol. The clip was almost dry, the crystal sliced to a thin nub of remaining ammunition. Sinantith and Uthne were dead. Maeva carried Uthne's stone. Teobal had Sinantith's. Their deaths had ended a friendship stretching across several centuries. There was no time to weep. And when that time came, there would never be enough tears. Eondin burned. The craft world screamed. The hive mind shrieked. The Asuryani howled, and the Tyranids screeched. The infinity circuit was emptied out, a shriveled husk of soulless nothing, and the streets were overfilled with the shattered dead. The Rangers did what they could. Their pistols spat death into advancing waves of repulsive bugs, buying precious seconds for the fighting retreat. When there was time and opportunity, they targeted larger creatures with their long rifles, popping eyes and searing gaps in blood-red chitin. Maeva moved mechanically, finding a hideous rhythm in the slaughter. She felt neither alive nor dead, neither awake nor asleep. Dimly, she wondered what her twin sister found so addictive about this life of war. For war was ugly. War was hissing insects and screaming children. The friction burn stink of sliced shuriken, and the metal tang of spilled blood.
Maeva! Teobal!
The ranger heeded Mairead's call, following her friend into the catacombs. The streets disappeared behind shadow and bone. The Tyranids scuttled after them in rabid pursuit. There was no space for covering fire, and the controlled retreat became a desperate flight. Guardians teamed past Wraithguard, wild with terror. Dire Avengers grimly fought at choke points with blood-chalked swords. Maeva felt them die. She strove to make use of the seconds they had bought her, pushing her body to the brink of collapse. It felt as though she had been running for days. Her body had been in constant, frantic motion ever since she passed through the webway gate of that distant desert world. She sprinted past another choke point, barely registering the spirit seers who shaped the Wraithbone into protective thickets, or the orange-clad warriors of the Fire Dragon Shrine. It took a few more paces before the significance of those warriors hit home. Then it hit her like an icy bucket of water. She spun.
No!
The fire dragons unleashed their fusion guns down the corridor. Searing flames scorched Wraithbone structures even as they formed blackened mesh walls. The craft world flinched. Iandin shuddered as the flames swept across her skeleton. Across her skeleton and across Aeldari and Tyranids alike. The fires killed without discretion. Guardians fell screaming into burning ash. Tyranid chitin melted and collapsed into a wet orange slurry.
Teobal!
Mairead screamed. Maeva gasped at the loss. She fell to her knees in despair. The fire dragons kept shooting. They set fire to their home, collapsing arterial corridors that had stood tall for generations. Maeva wept and breathed in the stink of ash and smoke. There was no escape. That was what the song had told him. Its sound grew quieter and more distant, though still full of pain and sorrow. He hefted his wraith cannon and fired. For a few hours, he had felt, and he had been glad to fight. He had learned to hate these creatures. He had learned to hate their instinctive behaviors and their unreasoning hunger. He had learned to hate the Tyranid that were the antithesis of all beauty, that existed only to break down and devour. His snapped leg dragged behind him. He had fallen behind the others, and they had long disappeared from his view. The battle moved past him. The swarm seemed to ignore him, favoring other prey even as he obliterated them with wraith cannon blasts. He had done everything he could. He had killed and killed. The living had run beyond his shadow and into the safety of the catacombs. He felt a dull sort of pride at that. He remembered flying through the void in his Darkfire fighter, the exhilarating rush of gravity upon his bones, the way that light blended at fantastical speeds. His friend operating the guns, star cannons firing at screaming torpedoes as he wove between enemy fighters and shot them down with prow-mounted lances. He remembered the joy and thrill of the hunt, the artistry with which they danced around their prey and dominated them over and over again. The tyrannid monster floated towards him, vestigial tail trailing in the air. Its cracked, shuriken-shorn skull dribbled psychic power and fizzling brain stuff. He lifted his weapon. He remembered returning home. She had been waiting for him. Her lips had parted, and they had shared one another's soul.
Muriel.
And there, slumbering peacefully in his cot, his son, beautiful and precious.
Aedenel.
The zoanthrope's psychic lash met the beam of his wraith cannon in midair. An explosion of immaterial energy washed across the littered plaza. The tyrannid's head popped, fissures in its skull cracking open. The shockwave of warp stuff bathed him in unreal fires, melted through his wraithbone body, and sent him toppling to the ground.
Muriel. Aedenel.
All was still. He was cradled in a womb of crystal. Sleep beckoned him once more.
Muriel. Aedenel.
He had already forgotten their faces, but that didn't matter. He remembered their names.
Muriel.
He sank back into the depths of ocean black.
Aedenel.
Hymanly, it is time to go.
Aedenel brushed slender fingers through his son's hair, stirring the boy from slumber. Against all odds, the child had managed to sleep, exhausted by the stretch of a day spent wide-eyed in the dark. Aedenel sighed. The boy's eyes had fluttered open with a simple innocence that his father could hardly bear.
Where are we going? Deeper within, love of my heart, where it is safe. Is it not safe here, Aher?
Aedenel closed his eyes. He traced a protective rune across Aemon Lee's forehead.
It is becoming unsafe, my child. That is why we must go.
They both shuddered at the sound of distant roaring, coming from deeper within the craft world.
They are waking the avatar of Cain.
Aedenel said. He quailed at the thought.
I'm afraid.
Aedenel swallowed, lifting his son to his feet.
Don't be afraid.
He told the child.
I will never let you come to harm.
Closer reverberations sent motes of dusts from the wraithbone columns, the aftershocks of nearby battle. If Aedenel paused to listen, he would hear the screeching of 1,000 monsters and the scratching of their talons along catacomb walls.
Where are we going, Aher?
Before Aedenel could reply, a doorway to the greater catacombs folded open. 2 howling banshees ran through. Aedenel felt the breath catch in his throat. The Exarch's armor was caked in purple blood and steaming gore.
Karale!
He called out. The Exarch turned. Her war mask fixed her visage into a banshee's scream. Aedenel instinctively gestured Aemon back, putting himself before the killer and their child.
Aedenel.
The Exarch replied. Her voice was distracted, her mind elsewhere. Aidenelle could feel the pull of war on her soul, the bloody addiction that had stolen her from his gentle love.
Carolee,
He repeated, stepping forward.
your son.
You know that is not my name, Aidenelle. Carolee walked the path of the warrior, but then she was lost, and Ava fought once more.
Carolee,
Aidenelle stuttered.
Ava, please, I love you. Come with me. Come with me and be with your son.
The Exarch paused. She removed her war mask, revealing a sweaty face laden with finger-painted runes of dry blood. Her hair flowed over her shoulders, made almost black by alien vitae. Her eyes were cold. They flashed brightly when they met Aidenelle's gaze.
You should take him to safety. This chamber will soon be overrun.
They are anointing the young king.
Aidenelle said.
Yes.
It isn't... It is not.
Ava grimaced.
No. Kaelin is the young king.
Aidenelle sighed gratefully.
Then you can come with us.
He pleaded.
He calls. I must go.
Ava, please. Look at me. Look at your son. Come with us.
For the briefest moment, Ava's expression softened. The war mask she always wore cracked along miniature fault lines.
Aidenelle.
Please. I love you.
Ava shuddered. Her eyes shone.
I cannot. I simply cannot.
She replaced her helm.
Blood runs.
She said, her voice taking on an unearthly tone.
Anger rises. Death wakes. War calls. War calls.
She repeated. Her voice cracked. For a moment, she was Carly again.
Aidenelle. My love. I'm sorry. I cannot resist it. Go. Find safety.
The Exarch turned. She did not look back. Aidenelle sobbed without shame. Somehow, he knew he would never see his love again.
Aidenelle!
The cry came from one of the other nurturers, snapping Aidenelle from his grief. Imprisoning the despair deeper into his heart, Aidenelle scooped up his son and joined the retreat. "We have come to witness," Kelman Firesight announced, "and to sacrifice." Ava inhaled slowly. She tried and failed to steady the erratic beating of her heart. She could feel Kane's fury. She desired nothing more than to succumb to it utterly, to follow her dead-end addiction to its logical end. But she was not Kal Elan. She was not the young king. The exarchs of the Aspect Shrine stood in a circle around the antechamber. Ava's position gave her a clear view of the runic door to the Shrine of Cain. Its edges brimmed with angry fires. Kelman stood with his back to the door, addressing the exarchs directly. Though the Farseer's face was hidden behind his ghost helm, Ava could hear the exhaustion in his voice and the scratching chaos that pressed upon his essence. Even this deep in the catacombs of Eondin, buffeted by the madness of Cain In the cold serenity of the emptied infinity circuit, the hive mind's screeching assailed them all. Doom hung heavy in the air. Ava welcomed the blood and fire that would follow in its wake.
Our words we give to honor, our hearts to battle, our essence to he who awakens,
Kelman continued. He lifted his witchblade in martial tribute, his voice grim.
The time for battle is once again upon us. The bloody hand will point the way.
He pointed his sword past the assembled exarchs.
Enter, young king, chosen one of the exarchs.
Ka-Elon entered, naked but for the bloody runes painted across his body. Exarch of the Dark Reapers, his countenance was dour, his dark eyes framed by a fringe of sweaty black hair. Scars made from every conceivable weapon known to the Aeldari marked his torso, etching the pallid white of his flesh with puckered pink and faded purple. He approached the altar at the center. Eva bared her teeth. Her emotions were a conflicting storm of relief and rampant jealousy. She could feel Ka-Elon's soul shining with glorious radiance, a psychic beacon in a storm of alien noise.
Wear the mantle of Ienden,
Kelman called.
so he will know who you serve.
Ava stepped forward with Shay Lewin of the Warp Spiders, each holding the corner of a heavy yellow cloak. They draped it over Ka-Elon's shoulders, as Qualendral of the Fire Dragons placed a garland of flowers upon his brow. Keelan of the Dire Avengers approached with the chalice of Creel. The young king barred his wrists over the vessel.
Cup of Creel, accept this sacrifice,
Kelman cried. The Farseer pressed his witchblade against Ka-Elon's wrists. Blood flowed into the chalice. Yet more flowed on the altar and floor. A burst of power shuddered from behind the runic door, flames burning brighter around its frame. Kelman and the exarchs instinctively took a step back. Only Ka-Elon, the young king, held his ground. Dahi of the Striking Scorpion stepped forward. In his green gauntlets, he gripped a huge double-bladed sword. Its runes gleamed bright, writhing in psychic torment. Struggling under its weight, it presented the hilt to the young king.
Wield the Wailing Doom to ignite his battle lust.
The young king obeyed the Farseer. He took the weapon in one hand, as if it weighed as little as air. The door to the Shrine of Cain exploded open. An inferno blazed within, straining against its leashes. Ava felt sweat run down her face, evaporating into burning steam against her mask.
Go to him,
Kelman called. His voice was full of dread.
Bring him forth.
The young king strode forwards, blood still flowing over his hands. He held the Wailing Doom like a scepter, his garland of flowers rippling in the thermal winds, the mantle of Ienden fluttering behind him.
Kayla Minsha Cain, he comes to you. Awaken and accept this sacrifice.
The young king stepped into the main chamber. Flames pressed upon him, but did not seem to burn his body, washing over him like ocean waves. The door slammed closed. Ka-Elon disappeared from view. Then, they heard his scream. It was an awful noise. It was the scream of someone tortured beyond the point of sanity. It was the scream of someone's soul being flinched, of murder, and of a suffering that could only be imagined in snatches of diseased, feverish thoughts. Ava did not fear death nor pain, but when she heard that scream, she knew terror. Her entire body tensed, ready for fight or flight. Her eyes were fixed on the door. It burst open once more, blazing with fire. They heard stomping, and then the avatar strode forth from the fires. It was a giant formed of volcanic rock and overflowing flames. Runic armor barely contained the destructive, explosive essence at its divine core. In one hand, it wielded the Wailing Doom, the sword having erupted into psychic flames. The other was bloody and dripping, forever wet with murder's reward. Its eyes were burning pits of hatred, its mouth an endless inferno of conflict and war. Blood ran, anger rose, death walked.
Kayla Minsha Kane, bloody-handed god,
Hellman shouted.
Go forth into battle. Lead your people into the crucible of war.
The avatar roared. The sound was as thunder over trembling mountaintops. War called, and Ava had no choice but to answer. Every Aeldari felt the waking of the avatar of Cain. A few people laughed, a few people cried, most people were silent. The souls of Eondin stirred, an undeniable warlust rose within their breasts. Guardian militia hefted their shuriken catapults once more. The exarchs returned to their warriors and led them into battle. The dead dimly remembered the bloody thrill of war and fought as though they were living again. For Maeva, though, the feeling was one of profound violation. The ranger drove her fingernails into her palms, so hard that she almost drew blood. Contrary to the last, she fought the temptation of the bloody-handed god. She hated how it felt in her essence. She hated the bubbling, unthinking wrath of its fury. Maeva redirected all that burning feeling into her disgust of the god of war. She reflected on the atrocities he had committed against the Aeldari species, his cruelty and his feckless savagery.
His failures and his imperfection,
a voice whispered, honeyed and sweet. Maeva fought against that voice too. With the march of Cain's avatar, the peoples of Eondin began their counterattack against the Tyranid swarms. Awful sacrifice had rearranged the fields of battle. The Aeldari had consolidated, and the Tyranids had been funneled into slaughter. The time of vengeance was at hand, but Maeva knew it would not be enough. She had seen it. How the sky had disappeared behind the endless swarm. How the very air had shrieked to the hunger of a hive-mind god. This was the last hurrah, the final moment of glory. A snapshot of pride before the souls of her people were lost to the horror of she who thirsts. But Maeva would not go with them. She could not save her species or her home. She could save her kin. As guardians and aspect warriors streamed the other direction, Maeva ran deeper into the catacombs. She navigated the winding wraithbone corridors, following the call of her heart, the quiet song behind Cain's pounding drums and the hive mind's screeching choirs. Her heart ached, but the ranger knew that her twin was lost. If it had ever been possible to save Coralie from the doom of war, the awakening of Cain had snatched that chance away. The addict had been given her fix. Her sister was lost to the bloody-handed god, and soon her spirit stone would be devoured. Her essence lost to she who thirsts. Maeva forced such thoughts from her mind. She had to focus on her task, lest she collapse to the floor and sob for years and years. She had not come all this way to achieve nothing. The music of her soul led her onwards. The entire craft world shuddered with the sounds of apocalyptic battle, wraithbone cracking along psychic fault lines as Eondin realized its doom. The end times were unfolding, and all Maeva could do was blind her eyes to that awful truth. She stopped running at the threshold of the door. Her eyes passed over dozens of children. As she saw him, Maeva let out a soft gasp. The child stared up at his father, his eyes unsmiling and serious. Those eyes were Aidanel's, but otherwise, he was the spitting image of Maeva's father, handsome and proud, a little haughty, a little defiant. The child turned and looked at her. A slow smile of distant recognition spread across his face. Aidanel glanced up.
Maeva?
He called out, astonished.
Maeva, is that truly you?
The ranger ran forwards, laughing as she met Aidanel in a joyous embrace. The child halted behind his father's legs, suddenly shy.
What are you doing here?
Aidanel asked. He laughed.
How can this be so?
It felt like a good time for a visit.
Maeva replied with a smirk.
Now who is this?
Aidanel ushered forwards his son. His eyes shone with pride.
This is Aimenli, the love of my heart. Aimenli, this is your kin. Maeva, your auntie.
Aimenli shuffled forwards. Maeva crouched down to eye level, smiling in reassurance.
Hello, Aimenli,
she said.
You look just like your Shona hair, but you have your hair's eyes.
The boy smiled at that.
Hello, auntie.
His voice was soft and fragile, like a butterfly fluttering within a jar of glass. Maeva felt her soul swell with love.
Have you seen Carolee?
Aidanel asked. Maeva shook her head, eyes still fixed on her nephew's face.
No,
She said, drawing herself up to full height.
but she is lost to us now.
Aidanel nodded mournfully.
They have woken the dead,
He said.
all of them. Even if we win, we have paid for victory with our collective soul.
We will not have victory.
Maeva corrected quietly.
I have seen them. They are too many. Even the avatar of Cain is not enough.
Aidanel bowed his head.
The prince,
He offered vaguely.
he might return.
It will be too late.
Maeva said.
And even if Kelmon could swallow his pride and beg for help, the hive mind strangles his magics. No. Iandin is lost. We have to leave. Now.
No, we cannot. It is safe here.
There is no such thing as safe.
Maeva insisted. Her tone softened.
Not on Ironton.
Aidenel shuddered.
My old body.
He whispered.
A drop of dew grown heavy at the leaf tip.
We must leave.
Maeva told him gently.
And we must leave now.
Where will we go?
Eventually, Bealtan. First, though, anywhere that is not here.
What about the other children?
If you can persuade their nurturers to join us, then I will guide them. But we need to go now.
I must try, Maeva.
The ranger nodded.
Then be quick,
she said. They waged holy war in the forests of silence and watered the sacred ground with alien blood. Maeva danced around tooth and talon, her executioner glaive a bloody paintbrush on the canvas of the cosmos. Every strike was a masterstroke, every movement supreme. In the presence of the avatar of Kayla Minsha Kane, she was reborn. Her entire existence had led her to this one moment of sublime violence. She realized now that she had been a ghost, a lifeless shade without sensation or feeling. Even in the fires of battles past, she had been but a dim reflection of her true self. Every moment of her long life had been a mere pretense. Every battle, every rite, every thrust of her glaive, it had meant nothing other than its role in bringing Ava here. Her life flashed across her mind, gray and emotionless, her lips parting around Aidenel's, the fever pain of childbirth, the deluge of conflicted love she had felt when she had first seen Aemonle's face. She had felt deeply and loved deeply, but it had been nothing more than a murmur's farce on an empty, drab stage. A long prequel to this moment of apotheosis, the final triumph of the warrior's path. She moved like she had never moved before, reaching new heights of grace and precision. The avatar roared its battle lust, and she answered with ululating howl of the banshee, cutting down a tyrannid warrior and using its corpse as a springing board for a pole vault with her glaive. She ducked beneath vomiting bio-ammunition. She decapitated a termagant with a perfect swipe that caused a smooth parabola of ichor to flow along the air. She thrust her executioner through another monster's heart, the weapon punching through its exoskeleton chest with frightening ease, and creating another explosion of purple-black. The Exarch screamed again. The psychosonic amplifier shredded the nervous system of a leaping Hormagaunt, causing it to freeze mid-jump before she cut it down with another perfect swing. She went to laugh, but that laugh sounded like a scream as well. A bone-chilling, soul-wrenching wail that shrieked across the corrupted glades of the half-eaten forest. She could feel tears on her cheeks. She was screaming, howling. She had never felt so happy. She had never felt so broken. The Tyranids were being destroyed. The Avatar cut apart a Carnifex in a flurry of devastating strikes, ripping out his heart with a bloody hand. Aspect warriors hunted and killed in precise maneuvers. Synapse creatures spasmed and fell, lesser monsters stumbling in psychic confusion and bestial pain. Guardian shredded Termagant broods with shuriken shards. Wave serpents and falcons hunted larger beasts, piercing their bodies with bright lance beams. The Aeldari wept to see what had been done to the Forest of Silence, but their tears were hot with anger and vengeance.
Victory!
Someone called out. The call was taken up by another, and then another. Ava screamed it too, but it came out inarticulate and wordless, her soul forever lost to Kayla Minshakane.
Victory! Victory! Victory!
The cries of triumph did not last. A terrible hush fell over the glades as the celebration faltered. Aeldari pointed up to the savaged sky. New storm clouds were forming, swirling, unnatural maelstroms of murderous organisms. The Hive fleet now sent yet another wave, and this one was far, far bigger than the last. Ava screamed. Mycetic spores fell through the sky. A monstrous hive tyrant clambered out before her, wreathed in eldritch light. Ava went to move, but found herself paralyzed. Her body was held in place by dancing motes of psychic force. The hive tyrant flicked out its lash whip. The long, barbed tentacle sliced through the poisoned air. And Ava finally stopped screaming. Aidenel staggered when he felt Carle die. He went to sob, but his throat was choked, his essence frozen by an overwhelming grief. He heard Maeva gasp. She had felt it too.
There will be centuries of tears,
Maeva offered. Aidenel felt her hand on his shoulder.
but they will be wept only by the living. Keep going, Aidenel, for your son.
Aidenel nodded. He continued on. He had managed to convince just over half of the other nurturers, shepherding a gaggle of frightened children through the trembling catacombs of Ienden. At first, he had felt doubt, his soul still burning to Cain's eternal flame. But then, Carle had died, and that fire had snuffed out to nothing. Ienden was doomed. The Tyranids had breached the inner sanctums. All was lost. He carried Aemonli in his arms. Most of the other nurturers carried their children too. They were exhausted. There was no time for rest. They had to get out. They had to escape Ienden.
This way.
Maeva said. The ranger led Aidenel down paths he did not recognize, seeming guided by some exile's instinct to the keening of the webway gates. Aidenel wondered if the gates would still function. He wondered whether the screaming shadow in the warp would stifle them to stuttering silence. He could only hope otherwise, but there seemed little hope to be found.
Not far,
Maeva told him. She turned a corner, and the exhausted group stumbled into one of the webway chambers of the dying craft world. Aidenel was shocked to find it unguarded and unattended. He swallowed despair at what that meant.
I can open the way,
Maeva said.
but we will have little time. It will need to close behind us immediately. You all understand?
The group replied with a series of grim nods. If not for the children, they would not have risked such a thing. They would not have dared to provide a path into the webway that the Tyranid might use, no matter how fleetingly the gate was open. For their children, they would risk anything. Maeva began to sing. She swept her leg along the floor in a ritualistic rhythm. Aidenel felt the immaterium stir, and every muscle in his body tense. The runes around the gate shimmered and then shone. There was a shudder. One of the wraithbone walls to the chamber collapsed beneath awful force. Tyranids poured into the chamber, loping, hissing things with 4 sets of vicious claws. Children screamed as their nurturers drew pistols, stepping forward to shield their charges from the coming onslaught. Aidanel drew his own weapon, all sense of fear abandoned as he pushed Amonlee back. He had never walked the path of the warrior, but his shuriken shards still found their mark, cutting across a monster's face and forcing it away. Creatures fell upon them. Aidanel screamed as the skin was flayed from his left forearm, leaving behind ruined musculature and fissured bone. Beside him, another Aeldari was whipped into bloody pieces, shrieking as she died. Aidanel dodged another swipe of murderous claws. He felt the cracks in his arm separate and howled as he used the other to pump shuriken after shuriken shard into the Tyranid's hissing mouth. The monster fell, but more were coming through the gap in the wall. Their numbers seemed endless. A film of bubbling light spread across the webway gate. Maeva's melody rose in pitch and volume, her voice desperate and pleading.
Through the gate!
She cried, abruptly ending her song.
Through the gate!
The ranger rushed forwards into the melee, drawing a long saber from its scabbard. Her other hand flung something at the gap in the wall. The mystery soon resolved by the blue explosion of a plasma grenade.
Aidanel!
She cried.
Go! Go!
She pulled Aidanel back, thrusting a bundle into his arms. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. Aidanel saw courage burning bright in his sister-in-law's gaze.
Go!
She mouthed, turning back to the breach. Her grenade had plugged the gap with plasma and broken limbs, but more were coming, pushing their way through, charging towards the gate. Aidanel swallowed. He turned. Amonlee was already through. The light of the portal was fading. Aidanel picked up a little girl and sprinted for that light. He leapt through the closing bubble, leaving Iandin and Maeva behind. Maeva felt the gate close. She felt Aidanel and Amonlee's souls journey across fathoms unknown. The ranger smiled. She parried a swipe of scraping claws and made her riposte. She plunged her saber through the creature's neck as 3 other arms tore her torso into shreds. Aeldari and Tyranid fell, toppling into death together. Her body disappeared under scuttling feet and tearing claws. Aidanel landed onto the causeway of ethereal light, the blue surface briefly flaring as if to give solidity beneath him. He rolled onto his back, letting go of the little girl. She ran off weeping into another nurturer's arms. He panted for breath. He was starting to feel the agony of his flinched arm, each moment an aching shudder that lanced through torn-up nerves. He was tired. He was so tired. Amonlee's face appeared in his view, streaked with blood and ichor. Despite himself, Aidanel smiled. The face of his son was like the morning sun against his cheeks, and his pain seemed to fade, made irrelevant by the infinity of his love. Aidanel sat up, hugging Amonlee close. He sobbed into the boy's head, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the precious beats of his young heart.
Love of my heart, love of my heart, love of my heart.
The moment stretched across time and space, grief and love combining into an endless ocean of hope and pain. Aedenel wept, and Aemon wept with him. They unleashed their pain and shared the burden together, and soon other children were joining them, other children and their nurturers, the survivors of Eondin weeping in shared grief and desperate solidarity. For all they knew, they were the last peoples of Eondin, broken but together, weeping as one. Finally, that infinite moment ended. Aedenel finally noticed what Maval had thrust into his arms. A small pouch containing a gleaming spirit stone. A promise of defiance and loss and hope.
Where should we go, Aedenel?
Someone asked. Aedenel swallowed.
To Bealtan,
He replied.
to Bealtan, and to our future.
Thank you for listening to this video from the Archive Tower. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.